Hello and welcome to the Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates, so as you can see, I'm just about to run out the door. It's always kind of funny on Sundays because I'm never sure really. Remember a couple of weeks ago when I was like on the street and it was snowing and that was Sunday. Because, Sunday's my day off. That's the day when I walk around. I don't teach, I don't talk to anybody. I just kind of hang out, relax. And so here I am, and I'm making a decision about which books I'm going to carry in my pocket as I hit the town. And I just figure like one less book in my pocket is probably, especially because this one's quite big. The other book I have, so I have a Russian lesson at 1 o'clock, so I got a Russian reader. I got to read a story about Mozart in Russian. Anywho, so today is day number 95. Which, it's just like 101 minus 95 is what, like 6? So that means that this is the last Sunday. I think that means that the very last day is going to be next Saturday. So today is the last Sunday. Now, do you remember when you have these experiences when it's like the last, today's the last month, and then, oh, it's the last week, and this is the last time I'm going to see this, and this is the last time. And then finally, you're just like in a new country. Or maybe that's just me. I experience a lot of last, because I've done a lot of traveling. And today we are going to continue our discussion with the. All right, so we discussed already, and I've reviewed, over and over and over again, the 3 checklists that I use when I'm working with people regarding how to talk about managing people: state drive, state styles, state purposes. And then over the last couple of days, we are working with these other checklists, the checklists involved when you're working with partners. So managing is like an up-down relationship. You have somebody who's responsible for other people. You have to delegate to those people. You have to rely on the output that they produce. And then you have partners where you are, depending on what the partnership is like, but to some regard, to some extent, you are working at some type of joint venture where you are kind of like partners, you're side to side. And it's really important to understand the outcomes that everybody is working toward and the reuses that everyone is working toward. And then, of course, how you support each other. And then finally, what type of work needs to be done in order for those people to prepare and get everything done in order to support each other. So, and then yesterday we went past the state. I'm explaining the state teamwork checklist, and we went past the state teamwork checklist, and we started talking about the state inventiveness checklist, because it's like, okay, so now we've kind of outlined our teamwork. We understand what everybody wants, and we understand how we're going to support each other. But then at some point, you start to realize that there are some issues. Now, how do you start to kind of like? So I'm suggesting that you use the state inventiveness checklist in order to think more innovatively about problem solving. And we talked about 2 different ways to use the state inventiveness checklist yesterday. So we had the full state inventiveness checklist. That's when you're trying to develop some kind of new product, some kind of new business, some kind of new technology. And then we also talked about the 4, like taking just 4 themes out of the state inventiveness checklist that can be used when you are trying to brainstorm. So these 4 principles, right? So reuses. All right, so let's think about how other people have solved this problem before. We talked about integrate. How can we integrate? Let's get in closer, and see if we can figure out how to solve that problem. Ignore, all right? So what are some things we definitely shouldn't do? And then, of course, there's ideate. So what ideas do you have, all right? So usually brainstorming is just ideate. And the state inventiveness checklist gives you 3 more ideas for how to think about this process of ideation. So now, here we are on the next checklist, all right? So let's say that you have figured out some areas that you would like to work on. Now, of course, if you are talking about how other people have solved these problems in the past, then you need to do some research. You need to figure out, how did other people solve these problems in the past? If you're thinking about integrating, then you're probably going to need to talk to some people and figure out how to integrate. All right, and then in general, when you are trying to solve problems, you're going to have to do some research. All right, so today, state assumptions. The idea about assumptions, it's like, how much information do we need? To what extent does the information that we have meet the needs that we have for information? And then can we spot needs for additional information? All right, so in this checklist, we have 6 different themes, and the themes help us to walk through this process step by step through understanding how to do research, how to do well, not exactly how to do the research. So the first step is scope. And what does it mean to involve metadata types? This is kind of a difficult word, metadata types. So let's look at an example. So if we look at the example of hire a salesperson, then you can see that, so in the book Create Crucial Insight by Dr. Thomas Buchholz, it said that people specify types of metadata that people think are needed to point to or work with data about relevant factors. Say that 5 times fast. People specify types of metadata. Let's start with that. People specify types of metadata. All right, so and if we go to the instructions, it says that involve metadata types. Okay, so it says select types of metadata. For example, topics, words or phrases, authors, date ranges, sources, quality standards, security levels, prior usage, and so forth. All right, so the very first step is like, all right, so I think the easiest way for people to think about this is keywords, because everybody search, when we start a search process, the very first thing that we do is we select keywords. We start to do the keyword research. And those keywords are what's going to help us to kind of get a little bit closer to the information that we need. Now, we are, most of us, I think most people, we rely on the companies that provide search engines, and we rely on their algorithms in order to help us to find the information that we need. But there's more than just keywords. There's more than just words and phrases. There's more than just topics, all right? But if you only have these search vehicles, then what you're going to do is you're going to start to figure out authors. Who are the authors? Who are the people who are discussing this topic? How about date ranges? Okay, so when did this topic become important? And how has the information changed over time? Next is sources. What types of sources are relevant? What types of sources provide the truth? What types of sources provide accurate information? All right, so all of these things will help you to try to figure out like which metadata sources to use as you begin to do your research. Now, the second step is to involve data. All right, so from each of these websites, each of these authors, each of these people, you're going to begin to pull out information. You're going to be able to pull out the specific information that you need. All right, so there's been two of the people that I've worked with very specifically. We have developed a database, and in previous YouTube videos that I put in this playlist, we talk about the process of developing some kind of database. All right, so we talk about how your database should be centered around your endeavors, the things that you're trying to do. So if you are clear about what your endeavor is, then you will be more clear about the types of data that you use. I think that the process of creating your endeavor is the first step. And then after you've clarified the specific endeavor that you are working towards, then you can start to specify the types of data that you're looking for. All right, so you go into the internet or you work with specific data providers. So if I look at these 2 cases that I'm aware of, all right, so I have one guy and he is very clear about the data that he needs. He's very clear about his endeavors. And so what we did was we just made a list of the types of data that he needs. And then we and he has endeavor number 1, endeavor number 2, endeavor number 3. And then we had tab, so if you're using an Excel spreadsheet, we have tab 1 for the table of contents, tab 2 for his endeavor number 1, tab 3 for his endeavor number 2, and tab 4 for his endeavor number 3. And in the table of contents, we kind of have a vertical, all right? So we have his main endeavor. Then we have endeavor number 1 and the types of information that he needs for endeavor number 1. Endeavor number 2 and the types of information which he needs for endeavor number 2. And endeavor number 3 and the types of information that he needs for endeavor number 3. Now in tab number 2, 3, and 4, we take that vertical set of data types that he's looking for, and then we turn it horizontally. All right, so if you go to tab number 2, you have endeavor number 1. And so it has endeavor number 1 and all of the data, specific data types that we're looking for. Now, under each specific data type that we're looking for, we have 2 columns. One column is for the link. All right, so if it's a PDF or it's a picture or it's some kind of file, then what you can do with Google Drive is you can actually create a file cabinet inside of the file. You can save the file and put it in the file cabinet. And then you can create a link, so you can link to that specific document. And then in your Excel spreadsheet, what you can do is you can create a link. All right, so there's 2 columns for each data type. There's one column for the link, and then there's another column to describe that information. All right, so then the other student that we're also using this data, this database is another guy, and he's researching different types of law. He is researching different types of data, and it's the same thing. So it's like when he has some kind of PDF or some kind of presentation or something that he's attended a seminar, he's attended an event, then he will take the documents and he'll put it into the file cabinet, and he'll create a link from that file, and he'll link it to the database. So then in the future, if he's ever trying to figure out, okay, I'd like to get back to that data, then he knows to go to the table of contents of the Excel spreadsheet on tab number 1, and then he can read the different endeavors. He'll figure out maybe it's endeavor number 2, then he'll click tab number, for example, tab number 3, and once he's there, then he can read the different data types that are associated with endeavor number 2, and then he can go through the list of links and read the information. Okay, so this was the presentation about this idea. And then he clicks the link and it opens that presentation. All right, so involving metadata types is the process of collecting data. And then involving data is, for example, it's how you then pull out the information from those websites. You pull out the information from those authors. And this is the actual information. Now, what do you do with information? All right. So it's like, okay, so I have the information, and then what do I do with that information? Obviously, you have to begin to evaluate the quality. So even after you've gone to a website or you've gone to an author, you've identified the specific type of data that you believe is relevant to your project, then you have to evaluate the quality of that data and make sure that the information is correct. All right. Now, in some cases, like for example, in the 2 different situations that I gave you, these two guys that I've been working with, in both of these cases, they are selecting metadata types. So the sources that they're using they can trust them. So for them, they haven't had a problem with the quality of data. Every time that they pull out data, the quality is always good. But then there's the next step. So the next step is then to look at the usefulness of the data. So you might have found what you think is the perfect keyword. And then you may think that you have found the perfect source. And then you may think you have found that data which is exactly what you thought you needed. And the quality is perfect. These guys always provide perfect information. But then all of a sudden you go to use the data and it's like, oh, it's the wrong year. Oh, it's like the wrong topic. Oh, it's the wrong, there's something wrong with that data. All right. So as you comb through the process of doing your research, you can see how, to some extent, you can see how these are actually obviously, obvious. This is obvious. This is the way everybody does research. Okay. Yeah, it's true. Obviously, you have to have keywords. Obviously, you have to pull out the data. Obviously, it has to be good quality research, and obviously, it has to have something to do with your project. All right, so then we're down to the last two themes. All right, so the first of the last two themes is called insight. Assume insight. All right, so it says ensure decision makers and other people and systems have key bases such as principles, knowledge, and assumptions upon which to make and implement a decision. All right. So if you're the researcher, I remember there's so many different movies about this. All right. So remember that Ben Affleck film where he is some kind of Russian expert, and there's a rogue group in some kind of Russian military facility, and they have gone against the government, and they're planning on launching a nuclear weapon. And they're doing it all because they want the U.S. to react. And then Ben Affleck is like, no, I'm a historian, and I know this guy. I did all my research on this guy. He's not going to do it. It's this is not him. There's definitely a rogue group behind this. And the U.S. is like, no, this is the Cold War. We got to blow them up. And then, anyways, needless to say, at the end of this movie, we're all aware of what happens. The thing is that Ben Affleck was able to create these assumptions. And he was able to say, based on the insight that I've gained from my many years of research, I have come to this conclusion that it is not possible for this guy to do it. All right. And to what percentage? It's he's 80% sure. All right. So he's a researcher. So the researcher, they take their information and they give it to the decision maker. And they have to be able to let the decision maker know to what extent, to what percentage, to what degree are you certain that this information is correct and will provide us with enough information to make this decision. So in previous videos, I remember I told you this story, if you divide the space between you and a mailbox by 50%, and then you divide it by 50% again, and then you divide it by 50% again, all right? So every time you divide it by 50%, it's like getting more relevant information. And the more relevant information you get, the closer you are to the mailbox. Now, the problem is that no matter how many times you divide the distance between you and the mailbox, you will never reach the mailbox. But you'll be close enough to mail the letter. Now, the idea is that although you can never actually, mathematically, you can never reach the mailbox, you can identify the distance between you and the mailbox. You can say that we have this much information, and it gives us a relative amount of certainty that the results that we want to achieve based on this information type are certain. And with more experience, then you'll be able to identify how much certainty you actually have in this process. All right, so the last step is talking about sufficiency. It says, ensure decision makers have estimates of the adequacy of insight for making a decision. I have a problem. So actually, I just explained that. So that was the sufficiency. So assume sufficiency is what I just explained. Having the estimates for the adequacy of insight for making a decision. So the step before that is assume insights. All right, so let's go to this example. There's an example. We only have 50 seconds. All right, so people explicitly determine or implicitly assume insight about relevant factors. All right, so that's talking about after you have data types. You're going in and getting the data. You develop your knowledge. You say it's good quality. You say it's useful. It's very useful. But then you also have to determine to make sure that it is about relevant factors. All right, so this has been our haphazard attempt at reviewing the state assumptions checklist. If you'd like more help, maybe you won't after this video, go down to the link below. It's Sunday, the last Sunday. Time to take a break.